Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything. Copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
This is the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, along with my trusty engineer, Rob Barrett. Thanks for stopping by tonight. Hope your new year is going very, 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 very well. We're almost at the end of the first month of the new year. Hard to believe, isn't it? We have a lot to cover tonight, so we're going to get right to it with Dr. Julius Worthen, a civil rights attorney who worked in civil law in Washington, D.C. before he retired a couple of years back and decided to go back to the area of Georgia where he grew up. He has some very interesting observations about what it was like as a black man going to high school when schools were segregated and what kids should appreciate today. The name of his book is Glory Days, Glory Years.
Well, it's about reminiscing about when I was in school here in Georgia in a racially segregated school system. And it tells about going through elementary school and into high school. And it discusses things that, as students, we did not have comparable to what the white students had at the white school. And the essence of it really is to show how we as African-American students during the 1950s were able to navigate through the intended discriminatory obstacles that would prevent us from getting an education. And that is the essence of it, is telling how the determination of and the mindset of African-American students during the 1950s and probably before and subsequent to that were able to obtain an education, notwithstanding the intended discriminatory effects of it. In retrospect, when I look back at it, high school was fun. Sometimes you don't realize what you don't have. And I think, although when I look back and I see the supplies that we did not have, for instance, like in science, for microscopes and other specimens, that would have brought science and biology to really significance. When you had teachers that kind of made up the difference, you didn't realize that you was really missing anything. It wasn't a constant fearful type thing. It was a matter of not having all that you could have had to have made your plight for education a lot easier.
What are your thoughts on some of the things that are going on today?
Well, they have changed and they have not changed. There is a tremendous, unacceptable dropout rate by African-American students. Even here in the county where I live, there's a tremendous dropout rate from school. And it's kind of hard, to understand that at this time and era, that we're living in, that there would be so many children dropping out of high school. And one of the things that I would hope that this book will be able to do is to have some of our present-day youth, view the opportunities that they have, which are great opportunities for obtaining an education, and in retrospect, look back at what my generation had to navigate through, through systemic, racially discriminatory obstacles, to obtain an education. And hopefully this will help them maybe to focus and create a rebirth of an interest in getting an education, because the state of the world now will be in the future is very competitive. And competition is neither black nor white. It's universal.
Well, I mean, I think you're definitely onto something. And, if you guys, I guess the message is if you could do it, so can the kids today.
Absolutely. That is the message. If they can see the obstacles that we had to overcome and was determined that these would definitely, not prevent us from getting an education, that when they look at the wealth of opportunities that they have now to obtain an education, that will make them say, well, if they were able to do it under those circumstances, certainly we should be able to do it also.
This is your first book, right?
This is my first book, and I've just completed a manuscript for a second book, which is quite different from this one.
I'm curious as to why you picked Paige.
Well, that was the problem that I was having, trying to figure. Even if I write a book, how am I going to get it published? Because I've heard so many things about how difficult it is for a first-time writer to get anything published. So it just so happened I was watching television one day and I saw a commercial about Paige, and I didn't write anything down, so I just patiently waited to see if the commercial would come back on, and I got a telephone number, and I subsequently called Paige and asked for one of the submission kits, and they forwarded it to me, and I talked to one of the persons there. I think he was the name Mr. Roma. And, and he sounded so encouraging. In fact, I was really suspicious because what Paige offers, it just didn't seem real that they would offer that. And it has just been a tremendous experience for me. My publication coordinator, she's just wonderful. And my navigating through the experience of writing my first book has really been, quite interesting.
Now, do you have people you can give this book to, or schools? Like, I would think somebody like you could go out to schools and could talk about, you're a well-educated man, and you could talk about your book and you could sell it. I would think this is a book students should have in high school for sure.
I have donated a copy to, I know one of the churches here to that youth ministry, and the Genealogical Society, I will donate a copy to them. The public library, I will donate a copy to them. And the middle school and the high school here, I will donate a copy to their library. See, what good that will do, and maybe it will have a point at reaching some of the youth.
I got to ask you one more question before I let you go, though. In New York City, cops, heavy-handed on people. Ferguson, you're a civil rights guy. Are we going backwards?
We are. We are going backwards. The thing, for instance, like the law that was upheld in the Trayvon Martin case, the thing about out in Ferguson, Missouri, we are going backward, because when you are racially profiled and you know that you're going to be profiled because of your race and you only stop and suspect it because of your race, we are going backward, and it's becoming quite blatant. I think before, a lot of it was closeted. It was done, in an underhanded manner, but now it's becoming quite blatant. We are going back with this stand your ground laws. That is one of the things. It just doesn't make any sense, because a person can say, well, I felt apprehended. I felt, in danger of my life, just because, a person approaches you in the vicinity of you that is of a different race. So, yes, I feel that we are going back, and I feel that the Department of Justice has to create something that has to be universally applied throughout all of the 50 United States.
Interesting perspective there, I think. And it's a double-edged sword for sure. I mean, on one hand, Dr. Worthen talks about how African Americans aren't taking advantage of the opportunities they have today that he didn't have, and yet he still managed to become a civil rights attorney. And on the other hand, as a society, it feels like we're going backwards in terms of the way we deal with crime, whether it's the cop or the suspect who needs to take responsibility, maybe both. I don't know. But it's certainly something to think about. So think about this. There is nothing in your life you cannot change. Our next author, Crystal Allen, believes it, lives it, and talks about it in her new book. It's called Like Water.
Well, it's a personal growth book. It's about how I viewed life as a child and how I integrated that into my life and how I learned from it as I got older and realized there were a lot of lessons in what happened to me. And I also realized that there are some people who will go through the same thing that I did, and they choose to mire themselves in it and stay there. But you do have a choice. And, I realized I did have a choice, that I could use that as a stepping stone and move forward and grow from it.
What kind of experiences are you talking about?
Just from how I was raised as a child. Well, I'm an African-American female, and, my upbringing was a little different due to some of the rules and the things that were going on in that time. And I had a very strict parent. My mother was very strict. My father was too. But my mother was very strict, a little tyrannical, if I should say that. And just some of the things that she did with us, we weren't allowed to go certain places. We weren't allowed. If we went out to play, we could only stay for an hour. If we couldn't step outside without being perfectly dressed and our hair perfectly coiffed, because we had to set an example. And then as I got older and got into high school and realizing I was just a different kid, just a really different kid. I didn't like the mainstream things, and how I reacted to that, and how I thought about what happened during that time. And I did realize now that I do work with young families and young people, is that a lot of times parents and adults don't read all the signs of what's going on with children. Children can exhibit their anxiety in so many different ways, and they just think they're just being obstinate teenagers when they're really trying to tell them something and they don't know how. I had children at a young age. My first child I had when I was 18, and my mother wasn't very happy, and I was not treated very nicely at that time, but they accepted it. And then when I had my second child, it was just ugly, flat out ugly. And some of the things she did to me because of that, to punish me for it, it was a bit stressful. And I was still in her house at that time, and it was a bit stressful, but because of that, it made me a stronger person and be able to face a lot of things that came to me, and through my life, I was able to face it, work through it, and keep going.
Are you a social worker?
I am a service coordinator for Help Me Grow. I work with children from birth to age 3 who have developmental delays. And what I do is I go in and meet the family, talk to the family, assess the child sometimes, look at the child to see what's going on, and gather information from the family to find out what's going on and if they truly need services. If, in fact, they do, I come back in and bring another agency paid for by MRDD, the Department of Developmental Disabilities. I bring them in, and they actually work with the child and do the hands-on, and I write the plans and make sure that the plans are in place and that everything is done properly to get the child the help they need.
Now, was it through your work that you realized you needed to write this book?
Actually, I wanted to write a book years ago, and I just didn't know how to start. And I always knew that I had something to say, and it took these years of refinement, so to speak, in order for me to get the correct words and to be more objective, and objective enough to write it from a viewpoint that wasn't blaming anybody, that wasn't saying poor me. It's just looking at it from an objective point of view, and this is what happened, and this is what you can do with it.
So you want to inspire people who feel like they're stuck.
I hope so. And, also it hits on a little bit of everything, even during, even a lot of teenagers now going through a lot of angst. I can understand why a lot of teenagers want to end it. I can understand why a lot of teenagers decide they want to do just, even though they're smart in school, they just don't fit in, so they act up and don't do what they can do. It's because there's so many other things that are going on, and they don't know how to tell anybody what's going on, because sometimes they don't even understand it themselves. So it touches on that. I will tell you that it touches on I don't know if you want to call it psychic or spiritualism, but I do remember before I was born. I actually do see people, or to coin a phrase, I see dead people, so to speak. I have always had that happen to me. I've always had strange things happen, and I talk about that too, about a house we lived in here when I was growing up that was haunted. And we all saw things. We all had strange things happen to it. And actually, the inspiration for my book was born out of a lady that I called my other mother, who encouraged me years ago to write a book, and I just never could get started. And in June of 2013, I dreamed of her, and it's like I was talking to her just like I'm talking to you, and she says, "Okay, I'm ready. I need to hear your story. I want you to tell me your story." I got up the next day and started writing and didn't stop.
So many authors talk about their psychic connections and how writing it's almost it becomes compulsive. It's what drives them. And Crystal is already on her next book, and it's all about that feeling that we all get that somebody's got it better than we do. Somebody's better off than we are, and guess what? They're not. Nobody gets a free pass. Nobody. No matter how perfect their lives look, there's something going on there. We got to take a quick break. This is the Page Publishing Book Club. Don't you go anywhere.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything. Copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
We are back at the Page Publishing Book Club. Hope you're having a good night. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We are talking about love with Sharika Jinks. She wrote Falling Under the Tahitian Sun. That sounds so romantic.
Yeah, I mean, it just came to me one day, and I couldn't stop writing until the book was completely finished. It's like it grabbed hold of you, the story itself, and I just had no choice but to write it.
Well, what was your inspiration, do you think?
Part of it was a relationship with my sister, watching her. That was just part of the inspiration towards it. Outside of that, I did some research, and I looked into Tahiti and some of their customs and stuff, and the story just grew from there.
Well, what's it about?
The story is about this woman, a very strong woman that went through something traumatic that happened to her. She had gone through most of her life where she really didn't pay attention to anyone outside of what's going on in her life. She tried to basically keep herself in control of the direction that she went. So mainly, she lived her life with blinders on.
Okay.
She had never really met anybody. And during a trip to Tahiti with a friend, she actually meets someone. And I mean, she really let go and let her hair down, and she found someone that fell in love.
Now, this is the first time you've ever written.
Yes, written before, but nothing's been published, and I still have a whole bunch of unfinished work. I've been writing since the 8th grade. I had a guidance counselor. He thought that I should go into writing. As a kid, I'm like, what is that about? He's like, you can write books. Because he read one of my little short stories in school, and he was just amazed, just blown away, by my imagination.
Well, what did you end up doing in your life?
Well, as of right now, I'm a CNA. I work for a nursing home, and I take care, just take care of people. I work with a lot of Alzheimer patients, dementia patients, and stuff like that. I've done all kinds of work, but when I have time off, I'm writing or exploring.
And you had a good experience with Paige?
Oh yes, I love Paige. I didn't even know it was possible. I've tried getting this book published before, but how you have to go through a literary agent, and this was completely different experience.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. Getting an agent is almost impossible. But it sounds like you're on your way, Sharika. And I'll tell you, it's stories like yours that sell Page Publishing. They should pay you. You just gave them the perfect commercial. The good news is it's true. Our next author, Sharon Sauls, also wrote a love story of sorts. It's called Why Now? Hey, Sharon, why now? Why now?
Why now? Because the reason why that name came up is because, it happened so long ago, but I was wondering, why would it happen now? Why would it come back to me now? After so many years of being single and trying to find someone to be with, why would it come now?
Why would what come now?
Why would this special person that I left that so long ago, why would it come into my life now?
Is this a true story?
True story, yes. It's been over 10 years. I haven't seen this person. We used to work together at night. And when I left, I had so much fear of him. I wouldn't say anything to him, even though I wanted to really be with him. I really wanted to be with him. But I let fear take over me, and I wound up leaving the job and not saying anything to him. So I started school about 2 years ago in September. I started getting this picture of him in my head, and it wouldn't go away. And I had forgotten about him all these many years. And I was like, yeah, I remember him, And after that, it just wouldn't go away. The picture of him, it was like embedded in my head, like somebody took a picture and just planted him up there and wouldn't go away. I was getting kind of confused because it was like, I'm wondering if there's something wrong with him and he's trying to get in touch with me, or, what's going on, and as the night comes and I'm trying to go to sleep and it's just there, as if it was burning my head, but I can't find him. I don't know anybody that knows him.
Okay, so what's the moral of the story here? Do you find him?
One day I go to school, and this is like months and months later. When I walk into the classroom, he's standing there. And me not really looking at it, that life was trying to prepare me for that. And once again, fear took over.
What?
Yes. I couldn't even ask him his name because, of course, both of us, your looks would change after 10 years, And I was too petrified to even ask him his name. I was just petrified to say anything to him.
He didn't recognize you?
I think he kind of knew, too. I don't know if he was trying to figure out if it was me or not, just like I was trying to figure out if it was him. And he's not thinking that life was trying to prepare me for this day.
Okay, so what happens?
I have another book I started on, so you would just have to read it.
That's a good answer. Good answer, Sharon. Good answer. Sharon is already working on her second book, and I don't know how many books it's going to take before we find out if she ever gets the guts to confront this guy. How much you want to make a bet he's married, Rob? Huh? That would be a terrible ending. Now, maybe he's not married. I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out. Finally, Charles Nye is pursuing a second career as an art teacher, and that brought back memories of a book he wrote with his daughter that could be very helpful in his new career. It's called Geometric Shapes and Forms.
Well, it's just a simple little book that me and my daughter, we started kind of sketching when she was real young. And over the years, each day, that we would sit around and I would teach her lines. We'd look it up and shapes and forms. And I thought that I might just kind of send it in and see what Page Publishing could do.
As you showed her different geometric shapes and lines, you just made a note of it and it became a book?
Right. We just accumulated it ourselves. And the little girl, I can't remember what page, but it says a plane is a flat surface. I drew a little picture of my daughter, Emily.
How old is your daughter now?
25.
And she was a little girl when you wrote this.
Right. I just found it laying around, and I thought I'll try to do something with it and see if it, you know what I mean? I was watching television, and it said Page Publishing, and I thought that would be interesting, an e-book.
And they accepted it.
Yes, they did. And they printed it, and looks pretty good, I think.
Are little kids using it?
I've taken the book to the public library, and they accepted it and sent me a letter saying thank you. The children have read it, and they're interested and get them motivated into reading other books. That's the whole point. Get them to sit down and read one, read two, read three books.
Charles, you know what? I think you just wrote your first textbook. And when you finish college and you start teaching little kids, you can make your book Geometric Shapes and Forms Required Reading. What a great idea, right? It's a twofer. You sell, kids read, and that's the whole point. We are just about out of time. Thank you so much for dropping by tonight. I hope you've been inspired. I know Rob is. Rob, he's got his head down. He's writing his first novel right now. How about you? What are you doing? It's what we do every Saturday night at midnight, right here on 710 WOR. We inspire. Come back next week, won't you, for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. It's time to start writing.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything. Copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.